Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our Smithers podcast. Today I'm joined with Stephen Harrod, the author of our Retail Ready Packaging Report, which is due to be published in the next couple of months. Hi, Stephen. How are you doing?
Hi, Eve. Good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you for joining me today to talk about Retail Ready Packaging.
Yeah, not at all.
So let's dive straight in. Why is this interesting and important to the industry at the moment?
Well, it's often an overlooked area of packaging, as it seldom really reaches or directly affects the consumer. Certainly not in the same way that, say, e-commerce packaging does. But it's actually profoundly impacting the way retailers act in stocking their shelves. And it's certainly having an effect within the packaging industry, as there is a notable swing away from plastics in many cases, and that's stimulating demand for paper-based alternatives. I mean, and that's really what one of the key trends here is, as I said, is this shift in favor of paper-based materials. And that's one key change that we expect to see in the market. But more broadly, if you look at the retail industry itself, it's changing. Back in 2020, the whole global retail industry suffered a significant setback due to the pandemic. Companies like eMarketer reported nearly a 3% drop in sales. But there was a strong recovery in 2021. Sales increased by about 10%. And then that was followed by a return to relative normalcy in 2022. Of course, the demand for retail-ready packaging is increasing rapidly due to the growth of the budget grocery chains, and they're all seeking this sort of low labor-intensive packaging. We're also seeing urbanization in the Asia-Pacific region, improving cold chain infrastructure, the rise of single-person households. These are all additional contributing factors to the growing demand for RRPs. And of course, corrugated RRPs are expected to gain market share over returnable plastic crates, as I mentioned, particularly in the fresh produce segment. It's a trend that might be impacted in the EU by the new Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive, the PPWR.
That's really interesting, Stephen. So in terms of sort of technical innovations that we're looking at in this market, how are we poised to deal with those?
Well, we expect to see modified cases increasing their market share over other corrugated formats, and shrink wrap trays are bearing the brunt of that change. Having said that, there's been a fascinating innovation in the wrapped tray sector. Mondi have introduced earlier this year a new product called Tray Wrap, which uses their Advantage stretch wrap, which has extraordinary stretch and high tensile strength, even in low grammages of like 70 grams. It's amazing. It's a lighter weight version of the new paper pallet stretch wrap that Mondi's developed. And I mean, it could change the way we look at stretch wrapping. It's literally a paper stretch wrap. I've never seen something like it. And that could really have an impact on the shrink wrap market, and is a viable alternative for plastic stretch wrap or shrink wrap in many instances. Of course, paper doesn't like water, so you wouldn't want to leave it out in the rain, but nevertheless, it could be a great game changer internally in supermarket shelf stacking.
You're right, that does sound like a really big industry development there.
Yeah,
You briefly touched on the PPWR just now. Are there any other
yeah.
regulations that this market's having to respond to?
Not really. I mean, it's all about the PPWR. Um, I want to try and hedge my bets on that question and just say the final PPWR is hitting the market in the next weeks and months. We need to wait and see to some extent what the ultimate impact is going to be. Generally, the feeling is that the whole plethora of regulations facing the industry will broadly favour paper-based materials. Currently, the version of the PPR that's to be implemented excludes what they term cardboard packaging from the reuse targets. EPR, on the other hand, is going to affect all types of packaging, as EPR policies literally shift the waste management cost from local government to producers. And it's broadly based on tonnage of packaging used, and thus it incentivizes a minimization of packaging volumes. It's also just been announced that the EUDR, the deforestation regulation, is going to be held off for a year, which is generally regarded as good news because it's not really properly thought through yet. So the impact of PPWR is still to be ascertained, especially regarding reusability. On top of that, you've got the US Plastics Pact, which has recently published what they call its Roadmap 2.0. And in that, among other things, packaging reusability has become a primary target to reduce single-use plastics significantly. So the impact of the PPWR and the US roadmap are yet to be felt, but they could benefit rigid plastics, which, these are well suited to the concept of refill or reuse with their durability and their longer life expectancy. And paperboard products are also likely to emerge, hopefully relatively unscathed, from these new regulations because of cardboard being exempt from the reuse targets in the EU regulations. So it's a case of watch this space.
That's really interesting, especially as you say sort of the impacts of the PPWR aren't fully understood yet. So it'd be interesting to see how that affects these markets when it is out and can be read and understood.
Yes.
So you mentioned before about fresh food being an area of growth for this market. Are there any other areas of this market that we should be watching out for as we go forward over the next 5 years?
Yeah, well, the market as a whole is expected to show about 5% annual growth on average over the medium term, which is good, with non-food applications enjoying above average growth rates, especially in areas like household products. We're seeing growing demand for white goods in the emerging and the transitioning economies as consumers enjoy growing disposable income. And then as you buy new white goods, you then need various household chemical products like detergents and fabric softeners and the like to operate them. And then that in turn drives up demand for RRP for those products, which tend to be in corrugated formats. In the food sector, we expect to see the highest growth in RRP consumption in the frozen and chilled food market, although that's coming off a pretty low base. And then alternatively, if we look at what's struggling in the market, the more mature sectors are slowing down their growth rates somewhat. So canned foods and pet foods are showing below average growth rates in RRP consumption as a whole. But that's largely driven by the high volume that's traditionally been in shrink wrap trays, and this is now stagnating as users shift to die cut displays and more noticeably to modified cases. But these are coming off relatively low bases. The same trend is affecting RRP usage in the beverage sector, but to a lesser extent. Overall, plastic RRPs are going to lose market share to corrugated and other fiber-based formats. We're expecting to see a drop of some 3 percentage points in volume market share forecast for plastic materials over the medium term to 2029. But it's not all bad news. Even plastic RRP demand is still expected to show some growth, just well below market average. And there are actually no regions or end uses where we expect to see negative growth over the forecast period. So all in all, I'd say not a bad market to be in at the moment.
A real boom industry for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you ever so much for your time, Stephen. It's been great to get a bit of a preview as to what this report will cover, and it sounds like there's an awful lot going on in the RRP market.
Yeah, indeed. Watch this space for the hot off the press version. Yeah,
Absolutely, which will be available in November. So thanks ever so much for your time again, Stephen.
it's a pleasure.